today on the long bonds than they were before the Fed cut rates by 50 basis points. What is that telling you?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
telling you that the expectations for long-term inflation are high, that the R square or the R star, the neutral rate is higher than people had expected. So that means that the Fed probably, in their own estimation, they're looking at 3% as their kind of their terminal rate, where the rates finish out on this cycle. Now, what does that mean? That means that there's likely there's definitely a risk of inflation spiking here, or else they wouldn't be holding it, at that. They wouldn't be holding their expectations at the end of next year at 3%, and the long bond is going to end up trading with a
Yeah.
yield higher than that.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's going on now is that the world is waking up to what James and I have known for a long time, which is that they're trapped. They're absolutely trapped. And that's why you're seeing record high gold prices. And that's why you're seeing silver breaking out. And, gold smells it, and it knows what's coming. This is, as our friend Foss says, it's just math. There is no mathematical way out of this
Yeah.
That's
without
right.
them printing more money. I mean,
Yeah,
if they don't print more money, the thing collapses.
and the trapped, just to give some meat on the bone around that, right? So what we're talking about here is, look, if the government, if the Fed allows us somehow to drop into a recession, right? So right now we're spending $6.9 trillion annually, right? So, and if the CBO is that's what they're expecting. It's probably going to be more like 7 or 7.1 this year. But you figure that in an event that we have a sharp downturn, and Larry and I have talked about this before, you figure it's about 10 or 12% of a rise in expenditures. So now you're talking about let's call it an extra $1 trillion. And at the same time, you're going to have a drop in your tax revenues, and we're super financialized, right? So
Yeah.
if you have a drop in the stock market goes down, companies not making as much money, they can't borrow as easily. We have expended, or the tax, the taxes that we collect are down by another, let's call it $1 trillion. Now you're talking about a $2 trillion deficit that becomes a $4 trillion deficit. That's trapped. So how do they deal with that? They can't deal with that. I mean, imagine the deficit going from 35.6 trillion as of probably tomorrow to 40 trillion in just a year. I mean, it's devastating, and they are trapped. They are going to try to avoid this.
Well, James, you brought up the risk of a recession, and this is actually a place where I get very confused because I try to watch all the macro analysis I can, and there are very intelligent people sort of on both sides of the spectrum, it seems. Some that are so certain that we're about to crash into a recession, unemployment is ticking up, we have all of these decelerating factors, and we will go into a recession. And others are on the complete opposite side, saying that we're going to have a melt up, we're going to avoid recession. It's very hard to see the signal through that noise. Can you help me?
Yeah, I mean, like, part of it is that part of the economy is in recession. You can see it. Lower demographic is hurting. The credit card default rates are over 11% now.
Right.
The multiple of the cost to buy a home versus salaries is at all-time high.
Yeah.
The food inflation has just been insane. Yeah, and inflation is down, meaning it's decelerated, but we're still up, 2 or 3%, 4 or 5% from last year. I mean, look at your grocery bill. And so clearly there are pockets of recession. Both my kids just graduated college the last couple of years. They've been fortunate enough to get jobs, but most of their friends are struggling. It's not easy to find a job right now as a young professional coming into the workforce. That's an indication. I feel like it was in 1994 when I came out. I mean, it was a difficult economy to actually get a job in, unless you were going to Wall Street or, into some sort of emerging tech company. So, but the other side of it is exactly what you were saying before, which is that massive fiscal stimulus. and there's so much government spending, and a great percentage of the jobs that have been created in the last 2 years have been government jobs, and a large percentage of the jobs that were so-called created in the last couple of years have been revised out. So you had 1 million jobs taken out of the calculation last month, and so it's difficult for you to see exactly. But the point is, and what Larry and I are both kind of arguing for, or explaining here, in our opinion, is that the government is trapped, and they're going to continue spending right through it and continue flooding the market with liquidity to avoid a sharp downturn. If we see one, it'll be a V recovery, just like it was in 2020, like Larry said, because of this.
Right. I tend to be of the David Hunter camp that we're going to go into a melt up, just that they're going to continue to cut rates. And it's, this is the biggest stock and everything bubble in the history of the world. And it's going to, in my view, get bigger. But that doesn't mean that at some point it won't end. Right. And at some point there will be no buyers left, and it will end. And it will end very badly. And when it starts to break, I mean, they can't handle a lower market. And when the stock market starts to break, the negative wealth effect, et cetera, is going to flow through to everything. And as James points out, in 08 and 2000, when we had those big market downturns, the deficit grew between 6 and 10% because, tax receipts come down from the stock gains, and costs and social costs go up. So, we're running a big 7%, 6-7%, GDP deficit right now. Imagine when that doubles in size, and then the bond market fails, and the only way to solve that is to go buy all the bonds. So, the Fed balance sheet goes from 7 trillion to, take 36 and add it to 7, right? I mean, there's really an unbelievable train wreck coming at some point. But until that time, hey, the band is playing on the Titanic and everything looks fine. Now, where's the iceberg? I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you one other macro data point that I think we should discuss, because to me, this actually drove gold in a big way. And I think it shocked a lot of people. Last month, or a couple of weeks ago, they reported last month's federal monthly deficit, right?
Yeah.
It was $380 billion in the month, 90 billion more than forecast. They were forecasting a deficit of 290, and they came in at 380. I mean, and I think that was, I don't know if you remember when that occurred, James, but gold and silver took off like rockets when that was announced. And, I think, right. I mean, now it's, look, this stuff's lumpy, so you can't take that month times 12, right? But the point is, this is really out of control. I mean, this government is out of control. And you had a presidential debate where no questions were asked about the fiscal or economic, situation or balance sheet of the U.S. government. Nobody dares to go there. Right. I mean, it's just not talked about. And yet, there's a train wreck coming, a big train wreck. I mean, I'm writing a book, and this is the topic of the book, right? That, you've got to actually hold assets which cannot be debased, because we know, based on prior history, there are, 50 years of example, that if and when that train wreck occurs, it would look like the Great Depression in terms of a deflationary impulse. And then we know that the policy response would be, we are going to print whatever it takes. And the Fed balance sheet, just as the Fed balance sheet went from less than $1 trillion, 900 billion, to, 3 trillion over 3 or 4 years with, QE and Bernanke. And then it went from 3 trillion to 9. It's come back to 7 under Powell. The next one's going to take the Fed balance sheet to 25. And at some point, the way, and I'm not suggesting hyperinflation is my base case, because it's not. It used to be a complete tail risk. I'm now thinking it's kind of a 10 or a 20% case. But the way that hyperinflation occurs is when people lose confidence in the currency, and they say to themselves, just get me out of this currency. I know it's worthless.
Right.
And, if the Fed comes in and buys the entire U.S. government bond market, which arguably it would have to do if the stock market went down 40% and the bond market sold off hard and interest rates went up a lot, you're on your way. I mean, and that's a 200,000 plus Bitcoin price going to $1 million, and that's a $5,000 an ounce gold price, so.
Well, hyperinflation is what, like 50+%?
Yes, as defined by Kagan, who's the leading authority on hyperinflation. He wrote a book on it in the 50s. I've got it. Talk about it in my book. It's 50% a month. Yeah. But
I
you
mean,
can have, I mean, even short of hyperinflation, we can have really high inflation a la South America.
right. Well, I could also see it just manifesting in assets, which has been part of the problem and why so many people feel left behind and unable to keep up with the cost of living because assets are owned by such few people, which is why I think we need to get the word out, right, on Bitcoin, the easiest, most accessible asset that you could start to dollar cost average into. But I did want to bring up the election because when I look at the price of homes or when I go to the grocery store or when I go out to eat, there are moments where I think, how does someone making an average salary survive right now? And you would think that if things are getting bad and people are really struggling and the economy tends to be the most important issue when it comes to time to vote, regardless of your politics, I don't understand how anyone would choose to go with the same essentially administration, regardless, again, whether you're a Democrat, Republican. If you are seeing and feeling all of this pain, you would maybe want something completely different. You would want a true change, maybe go in a different direction. The polls right now are as confusing as they were, I think, in 2016. And it seems like the election is neck and neck. But when I go out and I meet people, it's like their biggest pain point is the economy. So I want to get your take. Do you think the election is being truthfully reported in terms of where the polls at? Do you think that it matters? Does the outcome even matter? Is it good or bad for Bitcoin? I'm just curious what's going to happen with the election in your eyes and minds.
This is dangerous territory. James, you want to go first?
Well, first thing, yeah, it is dangerous territory, but okay. First thing, we've known that for a very long time. The last two election cycles, Trump's support has been underreported. I mean, that's just reality. Part of that, I believe, is the reason that the mainstream media has villainized anybody who has been in support of Trump for the last 10 years, basically. And they've said if you're in support of that, you're far right extremist, you're racist, you don't
Hitler.
care about women, you're sexist, like, and basically it's become this thing with the mainstream media that if you're for Trump, then you're an extremist. Now, what I believe has happened over the last 10 years is that the Democrats they've been captured by the far left, and they've moved that middle, that center, all the way to left. So if you're just a regular conservative and you were kind of in the middle before, you're now being seen as a far right extremist. So, but you're not. But okay, so that's one thing. So that's always been underreported, at least for the time that Trump has been in this election conversation or had been president. So that's one. The second thing is, yeah, the mainstream media, it's been shown that these polls are oversampling Democrats. I mean, you oversample Democrats, you're going to get a higher Democratic number. Polymarket doesn't look like it's been accurate recently. It looks like it's also been kind of captured and being manipulated. I don't know how or why, but it doesn't foot with some of the more independent polls. Rasmussen I've been watching has Trump ahead solidly in many of those swing states, and that he's ahead in the overall vote. He may be ahead in the popular vote, which is just astounding. So that's all part of the confusion. I don't know what the real numbers are. Nobody really knows, but I can tell you this. Anecdotal evidence is that 4 years ago on my block here in Nevada, a swing state, 4 years ago, I look out my front window, there were 3 Biden signs. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Now you flash forward to today. There are 0 Biden signs and there are 4 Trump signs. There was not 1 Trump sign in my entire neighborhood last year. Now on my block, there's 4. So, I mean, that's just indicative in a swing state that, to your point, Natalie, people are frustrated. They are struggling, and they want a change. And so, that's just anecdotal on the election, what I'm seeing. But as far as the election goes, we'll definitely go into that more. What are you seeing up there, Larry?
Well, it's not necessarily what I'm seeing here, but to Natalie's point about people being dissatisfied, I mean, I share James's view. I don't trust any of the polls. I don't think they're right. I think this, the way I view this election is pretty straightforward. I think Trump wins it, running away if it's a fair election. And I've got great concerns that it may not be a fair election. I've seen enough to know that probably the last one might not have been fair. And, that the other side existentially, does not want this guy to win. I mean, they've tried to kill him twice. And, they're going to do everything they possibly can to make sure he does not win this election. And, as long as you've got absentee ballots, as long as you've got all these illegal immigrants voting, you don't have explain to me why somebody doesn't have to show their driver's license or some form of ID in order to vote. I mean, there's so many things wrong with the electoral process. And we have electric ballots, not paper ballots. I mean, on and on and on. So, I'm very optimistic about how the country will choose. But, like Stalin said, it really isn't the votes that matter. It's who counts the votes. So, I'm somewhat cynical in thinking that, that maybe he won't be awarded the presidency, even though he's won it.
It's time for a quick break to hear these messages from my partners who make this podcast possible. First up, Casa. It is so easy to set up your Bitcoin 3-key self-custody with Casa that I can show you pretty much the whole process in just 30 seconds. You're watching it right now. I recently switched to Casa for multi-sig collaborative custody and inheritance planning because of their enhanced non-KYC required privacy and the ease of this mobile app. Make sure to watch the tutorials and get your Casa plan for 10% off at casa.io/Natalie. Next up, Speed Lightning Wallet, one of the fastest growing Bitcoin wallets out there. Speed is a secure, low-cost way to send and receive Bitcoin and stablecoins instantly. The app is super simple to use and customers love it. Download Speed using the QR code on the screen or the link in my show notes. Use promo code CoinStories10 to get 5,000 free sats. Next up, CoinKite. You know how much I believe in self-custody, and when it comes to cold storage wallets, none are better than the Cold Card. You can verify the source code, it's ultra secure, and it's easy to use even if you're a beginner. Head to their site in my show notes and get a 5% discount with promo code CoinStories. And finally, are you ready to take control of your wealth? The Bitcoin Way is here to empower you. Learn how to take full self-custody and eliminate all counterparty risk. Set up your node and become the master of your own transactions and enjoy true autonomy. And upgrade your cybersecurity and protect your online privacy like I did. The Bitcoin Way specializes in personalized one-on-one training to help you become fully self-sovereign. Schedule a free consultation today. I've covered several elections during my tenure as a reporter, and I will say that in 2020, I would go to polling locations and we did some stories on folks that would come in, mostly older folks who were going to vote for Trump, and they came in with their ballots or to vote in person, and they were told that they already voted. And they were extremely concerned, and they were there to cast their ballot, and they appeared very authentic and genuine, but they said they were turned away essentially. And whichever is the vote that comes into the system first is the one that counts. So if you try to vote twice, they told me it's always whichever was the first. And so it was very concerning because it does raise a lot of questions, and there have been more mail-in ballots than ever before. And I think there are already stories of, extra ballots being sent out, or, mistakes are made. People are human, even if you don't attribute it to something nefarious. It's a process that is very fragile and vulnerable to mistakes.
Yeah, and it comes down to a very small number of states. I mean, you wouldn't have to throw the whole thing. You'd have to throw Pennsylvania, Nevada, Wisconsin, a few swing states. So, but I mean, I pray that doesn't happen. But I think there's just no question Trump wins. I mean,
but even if he doesn't, let's pretend that he doesn't win. Let's pretend that anecdotal evidence is wrong, that they just hate Trump enough that they're just going to continue voting for what we're doing here. Okay, so let's just pretend that that's the case. I don't think that Kamala gets, she doesn't get full Congress, so it's still split. So even if you get a Harris administration, there's a lot of problems with that, on many levels. But with the most important economic issues of, impacting the markets with things like an unrealized capital gains tax or an extremely onerous set of rules and regulations for smaller companies.
Mhm.
Like, I think that it's going to be very difficult for her to get things like that done because
Mhm.
there is still there's still a split Congress. Likely. The other thing is, who knows? If she gets in, she may pack the Supreme Court, and then it's all bets are off. Then it means there pretty much is no election ever again. So, but I don't believe that that's going to happen. I don't believe that she would be able to get a full slate and a fully democratic government. So, and if that's the case, then we're going to get more of what we're getting, and we're probably going to get more spending. A
Oh, no
massive
doubt.
amount of wasteful spending. Like right now, you've got some southeastern states that are literally underwater. Like they don't have power. They're struggling. They don't have water. They can't operate their hospitals, and they don't have electricity to hospitals. So, and we're not sending money there, but we're sending money overseas. Sending however many billions more were approved yesterday to go to Ukraine. That's just a demonstration of wasteful spending, more deficit spending that ultimately will cause inflation, yet it will not cause productivity here. And that's a problem, unless you count some of the back channel defense contracts that come out of Ukraine. But that's the problem.
I don't know if you guys saw that picture and if it riled you up, but it made me so angry when I saw the lawmakers autographing bombs that could likely kill innocent people. Again, I don't care your politics. I mean, that is so disgusting and wrong. Well, I want to raise something to you guys because I mean, from all of the conversations that we've had together and in the Bitcoin space about the debt spiral and how unsustainable this is, it seems to me like no matter who gets into office, we have to print. We have to provide liquidity to the markets. It's the only way to keep this Ponzi scheme going. So does it really matter who gets in November?
In my view, it does. I think you're right. I think Kamala is more aggressive about UBI and spending money. And I think if you're really rooting for a monetary collapse, you want her to win because she's going to bring it in quickly or quicker.
Bazookas and fire hoses of liquidity.
Yeah. I don't think Trump is necessarily a lot better, and he's dealt the same hand. And at the end of the day, the liquidity is going to have to come from the Federal Reserve. So it's really not even a political decision at the top. It's more when the Fed.
But it may be a healthier liquidity because decreased regulation, increased, energy independence. And decreased wasteful spending are all good things. And that's what,
and there's no doubt Trump will be better than she will be on all those issues.
RFK Jr., that's what they're promising, know? And if Elon comes in with them to cut wasteful spending in the executive branch.
The negative, obviously, of a Kamala win is just their view towards crypto. I mean, although I got to tell you, Trump really, in my view, really stepped on it when he decided to do his own coin. It's like, dude, can you please stop? Get your ego and your desire to make money out of the way. I mean, good God.
I know.
I was like, look, I'm gonna vote for him, but good God,
he's making a lot of mistakes that a lot of new people into crypto and Bitcoin make. But
whatever.
Well, it was still cool to see him make the Bitcoin transaction in New York.
Absolutely, he went to PubKey in New York City. That's a big deal. I wish I'd been there.
Yeah, it seems like he would be better for Bitcoin, but I actually think that all roads are going to lead to Bitcoin when it comes to the policymakers and lawmakers. Sure. Maybe one will just take a little bit longer. But okay, we can sort of wrap up the politics talk, although I will put a bow on it by saying that anecdotally here in Missouri, where I live, if you go to the really wealthy communities, I see Harris signs.
Really?
Wow. And when you go to the middle, lower income, all Trump, which I think is fascinating because it's something that I think Kennedy talked about a lot. This idea that now the Democratic Party represents a lot of the elites. You see all the celebrities coming out, making their endorsements, the
They're all Hollywood.
billionaires. But the average working people seem to be going in the other direction. And just a couple decades ago, it was totally reversed.
Yeah, now you have the limousine liberals. That's what they are. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's wild.
That's actually David's term. He said the other day when we were talking, Larry, my partner in the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund, David Foley. He was describing the limousine liberals up there in Massachusetts, and I remember that having come from there. It's just it's gotten a lot worse for sure.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about Bitcoin. Give me some headwinds that are coming up that maybe people might not be aware of, and some tailwinds. Where do you see us going in the next 6 to 12 months? Because obviously, gold has been hitting a new all-time high, and we have stocks at all-time highs, but Bitcoin has had trouble, I think, keeping up. I mean, it's doing well. It's doing a lot better in the last week or so, but I'm personally in the camp that I'm surprised we never hit six figures this year. I'm almost feeling a little bit bearish, like what's around the corner? Are we going back down even lower? Which is great, right, to stack, but where do you see it all going?
Go ahead, James.
Okay. First of all, great uncertainty is not great for markets. Markets hate uncertainty. And so with Bitcoin, you're definitely sensing some uncertainty here. With we saw the Nikkei was down almost 5% last night. It's like, are we going to have another yen carry trade issue, or is liquidity actually being drawn out? Are we actually heading into a recession that we're going to have to stomach first? There's a ton of trading capital in Bitcoin, and they're moving around this thing, and it's not that big yet. So $1 trillion asset is nothing. It's just a fraction of a percent of the total investable assets in the world. When you have $900 trillion of investable assets in the world, and you've got an asset that's less than $1 trillion, it's going to get whipped around, especially when it's been the tip of the risk spear for so long. So that's one thing. But long term, and the reality is, and Sam did a great job with Lynn Alden on this, and in studying this, and it was in Bloomberg actually this weekend. They quoted the study that Bitcoin is highly correlated to the long term growth and liquidity, and so when you have money supply expanding over the long term, Bitcoin will follow that. It may not follow it week to week or even month to month, certainly not day to day, but it will follow it long term. And so if you just pull back